Hello, and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I am your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, and this is another of our Designers and Makers series of Fireside Chats. Today, with me is Jeff from Virtua Rasa. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, before we get into what Virtua Rasa is in a little bit, we're going to give Jeff a few questions. Same questions I give everybody that comes up and sits alongside me in the virtual bar, I guess. And we're going to start out with an easy one, or not so easy. But Jeff, can you tell us about your first role-playing experience, your first RPG experience?
First RPG experience. That would have been the old blue box basic D&D back in.
Nice.
I don't remember when that came out. That was before 1980, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably. I'm gonna say 77. Although I'm spitballing there. I know the DMG was 79. Must Manual was 78. Player's Handbook was 1980. So I'm gonna say 77 for the box.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. Is that before then, my family, my dad, and myself, occasionally my sister, were playing a lot of Risk, and I think my dad was getting tired of playing Risk, so he said, "Had you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons?" and dragged me off to a hobby store. So I was actually now he rarely ever actually played any D&D with us, but I was basically introduced to D&D by my dad.
That's great. That's really awesome. And I was such a big Risk player back in my early days. I actually took tracing paper and traced out the Risk map full size, taped it together, all these sheets, so I could have a portable board.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that was what a waste of time that was. But
yeah, well, once I got into D&D and then I discovered all the other war games, it's like Risk suddenly was no longer that interesting. I eventually migrated. My circle of friends, we migrated to Starfleet Battles.
Oh God!
Oh, I love that game. I hated that game, both really at the same time. I remember had one friend we used to. It would take him half an hour to allocate energy for a turn in Starfleet Battles, and most of us were much faster. I mean, we'd get whole games of Othello in while we were waiting for him. It got out of hand. It was a great game, but it was, and then the rules, I took up computer programming because I wanted something less intellectually demanding than figuring out the Starfleet battle rules.
I still have. I forget what edition the Starfleet battle rules were. I think it was like a stripped down basic edition. I still have that in my closet. And then I think I tried Starfire or something like that because it was kind of billed as a simpler Starfleet battles, but yeah, no, it really wasn't. For me, war games were some of those double blind games from Game Designers Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
I like the whole double blind concept, because you weren't like you didn't always know where your opponent was. You had to, put your scout units up, and maybe you found something or somebody, and something got revealed. But that was wargaming. Now we can do it all on computers.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm a computer programmer. I'm working on a computer tool for games, but I have to say, there's a certain. I kind of like the actual physical table. I think is important. That's it's like part of our what we're trying to do with Virtua Rasa. It's a virtual tabletop. It's trying to make it. We really want to, we still have a Monday night role-playing game, a 3.5 variant.
Okay.
In Seattle, and we wanted to continue the game anyway. And so we have iterated through several generations of technology to make that work. But really what we wanted to do is to maintain the experience of sitting around the table. We weren't looking for a D&D computer game.
Right.
So a lot of our emphasis in the design has been more on how do we make this like a tabletop as opposed to how do we make this a fully 3D immersive type experience. It's a hard problem. We have some success, and some things are so-so. It's ever working on it. But yeah, I really do like the tactile nature of actual physical games.
Yeah, there's certainly something about that, and that's I think that's why, like for me, when I use virtual tabletops, I'm like a minimalist. It's like, yeah, I want my map and I want a dice roller and a communication with my players, but I'm not so worried about line of sight and shading and the lighting and shadows deal. It's like I wouldn't have that at my regular table. I don't, I want to replicate stuff that would be at my table. Now, if you could replicate, like, I don't know, the jokes we used to play at each other, like, do you remember when like the ring dings were wrapped in tin foil individually, not in these like cellophane packs? And we played a joke on one of my friends, and we used easy cheese and squeezed in cheddar easy cheese and half the ring dings and waited for him to eat the wrong one.
Oh dear.
That's the stuff I wish we could replicate with a virtual tabletop, because that's stuff that only happens at a table amongst friends, and
most of our long running game, it's been more like verbal jokes.
Yeah, well,
the time, and the time that one of my characters one-shotted a lucent worm, just like a CR-17 monster, I set it up for this big encounter for the next hour and a half of gaming, and they come in and one-shot it with a finger of death, and it was very frustrating as a GM, but that's remembered 15, 20 years later, they still talk about that.
That's what gaming groups do.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah, and in a certain sense, we're very minimalist in what we're trying to do. I mean, we started using MapTool, and the complaint they had from the guy who was doing MapTool is it was so much work. He had to do so much work to set up the adventures beforehand.
I remember using,
especially you want line of sight. Well, you have to lay out.
Yeah, everything. You're pointing. Everything is oh god.
To
flashbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I used to. There were times when I was, we started a game and at work. We were all coworkers, and we would just stay late after work and take over in a conference room. It was an ISP sphere where you could get away with that kind of thing. So we'd taken over a conference room, and our game map was the whiteboard, and I would just I would just throw things up on the fly. Later, we migrated when the ISP went belly up and we could no longer all meet at work. We migrated to my basement and set up, a traditional map. And again, we'd have an encounter, and I'd decide what kind of space would be interesting for this counter. And I had these roundish river pebbles I'd gotten from a craft store, and I just lay out a map by just tossing them on the map on the fly. So the idea that you should be able to create things on the fly without having to think about it in advance was really kind of central to everything we were doing. We were at a conference this weekend, kind of our first real public demo of it, of Virtua Rasa, BFG Con in Frederick, Maryland. And I got, we had a small audience for our demo. I think we had like 8 or so people, maybe 10. 2 or 3 people really active in comments and interests, and a couple other people comment afterward. And the interesting thing I heard, they were commenting is, for someone who's trying to build a product, they've done very mediocre research on the competition.
Mm-hmm.
they were commenting that it was so nice that they didn't actually have to do a lot of setup.
Yeah,
That, I mean, when you go into Virtua Rasa, you create your world, and your world will start out. It will start out looking like a very large Chessex map, where you can start putting things on. And apparently, most of the other virtual tabletops expect you to do a lot of pre-planning, pre-work type effort.
Yeah.
I mean,
as a GM, I gave up on Fantasy Grounds because of that.
yeah, I mean, we don't even. I mean, my partner Ben, I believe you had the Fireside chat with him last Tuesday. You know, he's looking. He really does want to do line of sights and fog of war. He's really, that's a thing he wants to do. I myself, as a GM, I'm certainly going to support him doing it. But I myself, as a time to lay out all the buildings and all the rooms so that you can actually do line of sight. And half the time, half the time it's like a city, but if you're lucky, a tenth of the city will actually be visited by the player. It is never quite clear. So if you have to lay out the whole city beforehand, you've just increased your planning by a factor of 10.
Yeah.
So I think you really need to be able to do it on the fly and do it improv. Now you can upload you can do fairly elaborate planning if you have that. In fact, our demo world, if you connect to our demo world, you'll see what a town, village, city map, port map of a port city that I'm reasonably pleased with. So you can put a fair amount of complexity in there.
Well, I actually was peeking at that before I sat down for this. I was moving around a token or two. So,
in our Techie Ningo world, I think I saw you.
Oh, you lost him. Let's see how long it takes to get back. So how shall I entertain you all as we wait for our... There we go. There we go.
Hello. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button.
That's okay. I was doing a little
that'll
soft
teach
shoe.
me.
I did a little soft shoe. Did a little
so you were looking...
We're good.
Did we lose voice again?
You got a little bit of a lag at points. We call it the Glenn Hallstrom effect on Discord.
Yeah, I keep seeing this list RTC disconnected message.
I don't know. You sound good at the moment.
Yeah. So definitely, I think Discord is having troubles today. Oh, I know what's going on.
What's up?
I bet I know what's happening. So this is GDC, big game design conference this week, and Discord has announced this big thing about selling your games on GDC. So their servers are probably getting slammed. They're probably having way more traffic than they normally have.
That makes a lot of sense now. Okay. And especially here we are, it's 10:30 at night, and when do a lot of people get on in the first place? Usually around this time.
Nope.
So makes perfect sense. But yes, I was playing it around a little bit.
This is dropouts.
Oh, you didn't hear me? Okay.
You said something about here we are, and then it went silent.
No, what I was saying is I was playing a little bit with the demo before we started this chat.
Awesome. What did you think?
Yeah. We are having troubles today.
A Discord? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not playing well. I don't know. Should I make another server change beyond where we're at now? I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna make a difference.
Well, if we get these brief dropouts, they're not too bad. I don't think we're going to get bogged down. I mean, this is actually the flip side. We have desperately been struggling not to do anything with voice for Virtua Rasa. We really want to play. We really want to believe this is a solved problem and that you could just use a standard existing voice provider.
And most times, apparently, you can.
Yeah, it's like 90% of the time they work. Although, it's like Google Hangouts, which is what we've been using for the longest time, is apparently going away.
Oh, wow! Now this is a distraction for me. I remember when they took Hangout and removed it from Google Plus, which to me was the first sign that Google Plus was going to go away. And now they're going to remove Google Hangouts. Wow.
Yeah. Skype's quality has. We were using Skype for a long time, but then they went downhill, and Hangouts had just come out, and Hangouts was great beginning. I mean, that's Google. They have a great beginning product, and then with the exception of search and email, their follow through is just not there.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a change on the blog.
Very frustrating. Anyways, I think we should just keep going and
we'll muddle through.
Let technology fall where it does.
Yeah.
So, anyways, you were looking at our map.
Yes, and I was playing with your map earlier, and like I said, the zoom in and zoom out was extremely smooth, which I'm not used to be honest.
You're not used to extremely smooth?
No, well, listen, we're talking about problems with voice. Roll20 does a lot of good things well. What it doesn't do well is the voice and video. I can't tell you how many times, and we gave up on using that about a year and a half ago. So
oops, you dropped out again.
Yeah, fun times. What I was saying is that Roll20 has a bad implementation, or at least I stopped trying their voice about a year and a half ago because whenever we tried to do it as a group, the person in Atlanta could not hear the person in Florida, but the person in New York could hear both, but neither one could hear him. It was really an awkward thing to get synced up. So I don't blame you for sticking away from voice and video.
Yeah. I mean, we thought about there's an open source Mumble server, and it's like we really don't want to get into that business. But on the other hand, it's for what we want. We have to have voice. We're trying to do a virtual tabletop. We're not trying to be a video game. And we can't really do a lot in terms of the physical presence, although we have some stuff with the cameras, which I can talk about later, to give some kind of ghost of physical presence. So the only other way to be with your friends is to have voice. So, integrating voice. I mean, I've been part of the reason I'm familiar with the developer stuff on Discord is Discord has, for the most part, I mean, we're having troubles tonight, but the quality of the voice and sound I get with Discord is really nice. And it's like,
it's exceptional.
Yeah, it would be really nice to find a way to use Discord's voice service with us. Although so far it doesn't look like they're really kind of set up for that business model. So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can somehow figure out how to talk to a human being at Discord and sort that out. I see if there's some way we could work something out.
Yeah, that's one thing with Discord that disappoints me is that there doesn't seem to be a way to directly, reach customer service. Like we put in an application to be a partner, and they got the application. I got that notification that says it takes
you put in an application to be
a partner Discord server.
Right.
Basically, it's an separated server, and we thought that we have a large membership here compared to other partner sites, and we do a lot of stuff on Discord, live shows, stuff like this. And they got my application. It's the second time I submitted one. First time we got a rejection in 4 days. They told us to expect a week or two for a response. It's been over a month. No, yes, no, nothing. So
that's kind of that's aggravating. That's kind of
yeah.
See,
it is frustrating, and of course they say, well, if you have questions, you can always ping us on Twitter. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's the one problem I have of trying to use too much of their technology. I mean, and I've thought about using the chat window. It would be nice to do a Discord to a gateway, but again, it's very hard to figure out how to do that, or if that's even supported.
I couldn't tell you. I do love Discord. I think Discord does.
Can you still hear me?
Somewhat, I can still hear you.
Okay, you are there.
You
okay.
You've been dropping in and out a little bit, but
okay, sounds like it's happening to both of us.
Yeah, like you said, their servers are getting hard.
Yeah. Okay, so I forgot the theme for the evening, though.
Actually, you know what? I know, just realizing this, even our recorder has been dropping in and out of the conversation.
Oh dear. Hopefully, it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's been graying out. Well, folks, if you do hear this episode, I'm impressed. It might not be heard at this rate, Jeff. I don't know.
Yeah, if that turns out to be the case,
we'll just do it again when
they're
not getting hit so hard.
We'll give it another go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've made it through your first question. You got to want to go to the second one?
Yes. What's your go-to RPG system?
It's kind of like these days. Basically, it's a 3.5 derivative, actually a Pathfinder derivative. I have a couple friends who decided to rewrite Pathfinder in their own vision, Epic Path. Okay. epicpath.org.
Okay.
It's kind of it's for really super powered players and they're very obsessive about the numbers. One thing I really like about it is the monsters are relatively predictable. I never like it as a GM when I accidentally kill a character because I didn't realize the monster was more powerful than it looked.
Okay.
Or vice versa. They come in and they walk through in a single round, wiping out the entire encounter because, again, the CR, say 5 monsters were really more like CR4, CR3. So right. They go through a fair amount of trouble to make that there. Although, I think part of the reason I stick with this is I know this. I don't need to think about it.
Right.
Not that I necessarily think 3.5 is the ideal gaming system. It's just that I kind of want a game. I don't want to spend a lot of time researching rules.
Right, and if you already know the system, then you don't have to really research rules.
Although some of I've not really read much on the 5th ed rules, and hearing about some of the streamlining, really kind of makes me think maybe this would I should probably give it a close look, because certainly 3.5 gets you really deep in, especially for the players. It gets really, really complicated. I never really encountered the old school rules. I don't know if it's a movement is the right word.
Right.
Until I started actually connected to Tenkar's Tavern, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and I was remembering the old AD&D rules. And the kind of thing is my friends that doing the Epic Path stuff, very carefully balancing everything to make sure everything, all of the powers are, in balance and expected, and no one class is superior to any other class or anything. And you really can't say First Ed is anything like that.
Oh no, God! And First Ed tried to do artificial balancing either by experience point tables or racial level limits and stuff like that. But
oh yeah, no. First Ed was all over the map in terms of balance.
Yeah,
but what I'm kind of wondering here is I'm stepping back. is that part of it? Was that part of the charm? And that, everything was so unpredictable in First Ed. That
I think that was a lot of the charm. I'll be honest with you.
yeah, it's almost like too careful of game balance ends up taking out all of the. It becomes very
gamified.
Gamified is one way of putting it. Yeah. It makes it a very different game, and like chess is a very precisely balanced game, and chess is a decent game, but it doesn't. Chess is you really have to be deeply, deeply into chess before you start getting into all the subtle surprises and unexpected stuff to it. And then you have to spend years of research. I'm not going to say there isn't that in chess, but that's the kind of thing that it takes vast amounts of chess playing to get to. You're not going to pick up a chessboard. Well, I know I'm going to say I'm all wrong. I'm full of it right there. Chess is really magical when you first play it. I have to remember back, actually first learned it, and there was a kind of an initial magic, and then it all becomes like a well-defined space, and then you are refining everything you do. And that's like modern role-playing games are like that. There's kind of this initial wave of magic, but then it becomes this game of optimization.
Right.
And
I've seen it in Pathfinder and other systems.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of, and part of me is like, I think back, okay, First Ed, I remember getting the first player's handbook and the first monster manual, and there's a lot of nostalgia there. That's going to be hard for any new game book to recapture.
I think that's a large reason why the OSR movement, or old school gaming, with the new presentation of what is basically the older rules, so you're presenting them in a way that the modern reader expects rules to be written, and with 30 plus years of advancement in game writing, you can present something that isn't as Gygaxian as the original AD&D books were. Much more approachable, but still have that the mechanics don't change, just the presentation.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna probably have to track down some of the modern rewrites and just see what folks are doing there.
Well, I can give you some ideas. Pretty much, if you want an AD&D rewrite, Osric, that pretty much is AD&D represented. Labyrinth Lord is basic expert. Swords and Wizardry comes in multiple flavors, but the Swords and Wizardry core rules are pretty much the original white box, and the complete Swords and Wizardry complete rules would be white box with some of the classes that were added on. Basically, it's a lot like AD&D, but simplified, because it has all the AD&D classes that were presented either in Dragon or Strategic Review, but much more simplified than we saw them in AD&D.
Yeah.
So those would be your three. Then there's derivatives of the above, but yeah, you can get them all free in PDF.
Okay, so that Osric, Swords and Wizardry, and I missed one. Something with
Labyrinth Lord. Labyrinth Lord is your basic expert. Like, you came in with the basic box set. Labyrinth Lord is your basic expert clone.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I get the basic box set, and then I skip straight to the players AD&D player's handbook. So
yeah, I totally skipped the basic set myself. I went right with AD&D because my friend introduced me that way, and my issue then became, I figured basic. This is advanced, right? So basic is for babies, and it wasn't until I became an adult gamer that I realized that basic D&D was really awesome. Definitely not for babies.
Yeah.
But,
well, yeah.
Right,
the thing I noticed, they just keep going on this thread a little bit. I mean, I'll play 3-5 based combats, and once you get to the middle levels, it's like, this combat which goes 3-4 rounds long, we'll be doing well to get it done in an hour.
Right.
So if we set aside, say 2.5 hours on a Monday night, you throw in a little, a little role playing on either side of the combats, we're rarely able to actually squeeze more than one in a night. And, you go back to the simpler rules, it's like, you got to be able to get through several rooms in those cases.
Oh, God, yeah. Just to put it in perspective, so with Swords and Wizardry, there's also another version out there called Swords and Wizardry Light. It's 4 pages, 3 levels, 4 classes, 4 races. I helped put it together a couple of years ago when I retired. And I use this exclusively when I run convention games because I can give people their own rule set of 4 pages to keep, and everybody creates their character at the table. And in about a 3.5 hour window, I spend 15 minutes explaining the rules and generating characters. And during those next 3.5 hours, we've probably got 6 to 9 encounters with combat and role playing encounters in under 4 hours. And I could not do that with a modern rule set because the combat, and I'm doing this with 3D terrain. It takes
it's hard.
huge.
It's hard to generate 3-5 characters in under like 2 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically have to have pre-generated characters, and that's like first level. Yeah. So now the thing is, to turn around the defend 3-5 for a moment. One thing 3-5, the 3-5 flavor, okay, Pathfinder and everything that goes to that level of depth is it rewards going to a lot of depth. For people who really want to dig into it, they want to spend a lot of time thinking about what their character can do, and they want to have a lot of choices to develop. There's a certain appeal to that, although it's a huge barrier to entry to somebody who's new to it.
Certainly, and not for nothing. Some players thrive on that level of depth, and some players embrace the freedom that comes along with not having necessarily all that depth because then they get to fill in the blanks. And case in point, not last week's Gary Con, but last year's Gary Con, I had to run a game of 5e because the GM never made it because of bad weather. And I don't run 5e. I don't know 5e nearly enough to run it. So I went with my Swords and Wizardry Light rules and passed them out, and I apologized and I explained. And I had 5e players, and I still got them up and running in 15 minutes. And except for the one guy who tried to use Intimidate and Intuition as skills, I had to tell him, if you want to intimidate, go ahead and intimidate. If you think somebody's lying, tell me why you think they're lying. They embraced the relative freedom. And out of my 8 players, 4 went back to the Frog God Games table, where we carry Swords and Wizardry, and actually either asked for more of the free rules to bring back to their group. I think 2 of them bought the full Swords and Wizardry complete rules, but 4 did not. So there's people that see this as freedom, and at the same time, there are people that need that structure. No one game is going to fit everybody. No one play style is going to fit everybody. Some people can adjust more to either or, but some people have a preferred preference, and that's fine. That's what makes the hobby healthy.
Yeah. Now, one thing, all these thoughts about the old school rules and what you're telling me about Swords and Wizardry has, been bringing up in my mind is what 3-5 probably needs as a on-ramp is very boring character classes.
Probably.
Yeah, there's the old AD&D fighter. What did the fighter do? The fighter walked up and hit it with a stick or a sword. That was like there were no feats, there were no skills. There was you walk up and hit it. And all the thought about being a fighter is, well, how do you position yourself? How do you, the meat shield for the wizard,
right.
and the wizards really, they were much more glass cannons then. And I think you need, I think if you want to have complicated rules like 3.5 and still be accessible. You need some of these very simple, very unexciting character classes that are still they can hold their own with the regular classes. They have to have enough
I
power,
think
but there's not a lot of choices to be made when you're playing them.
I think that one of the best things that Paizo did with Pathfinder was they put out the beginner box. Beginner box made it approachable. It was greatly done. I know they're putting out one for Starfinder, but the Pathfinder beginner box, in my mind, is the most value for your money that you can probably get as a role player.
I've not looked at it.
It has
look
no.
into it.
Oh, okay. I know it's still in print. You might have to find it, but they had Pongs. So I've taken those Pongs that came with those little cardboard circular Pogs or whatever, and I've used them with other games. But it was the version of Pathfinder that I was actually able to sit down and go, "Hey, I get it now." And I could probably have moved on to the fuller system and not have been as overwhelmed as I was when I opened up my initial Pathfinder rulebook back when it first came out and went, "Oh God, this is much to deal with." Which is why I am solidly old school and a lot of stuff. I'll stray away once in a while for really cool settings, but I like rule sets that don't overwhelm me. But that's just a preference for me. I'm the guy that was really good in math until I got to pre-calculus, in which case my brain said, "Yeah, you're done."
Oh dear.
Oh well, yeah. Oh, I excelled junior high school and high school, and I got to college and like, oh yeah, pre-calc, man, or full calc, pre-calc first test 29, and down from there. I was like, yeah, I think I got a little ahead of myself there. So I like math, but there's a limit to it.
So, shall we move on to question 3?
We can move on to question 3. Yes. Well, it goes back to your basic set, man, and limiting classes. Race is class, yes or no? You know, when you have dwarf is a dwarf.
Well, that's a complex thing, there, isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that. I never really liked that. I like the more, various races can have various classes. That was, yeah, and it's I think having the various races have various strengths and weaknesses is interesting, but I never really liked the limits.
Yeah, the only races class version that I actually liked was Adventurer Conqueror King system, which it's a branching off of Basic Expert or Labyrinth Lord, and what they do is they have classes that are specific to dwarves, specific to elves. So, sure, you could be an elven. I got it. It's come from AD&D days. Blade Singer as a class. Nobody else can be it. No human can be it. But it's a racial specific class, and I like that because it's a lot of atmosphere and still. But at the same time, it's not as limiting as all dwarves are fighters.
Okay, yeah, that I think that kind of works. That kind of works for me there. I mean, it's because the races are kind of a dwarves are a stocky and higher constitution, and so they're going to have different specializations, and it comes also with their own culture.
Yes, and that's why I like that.
The idea that they have different classes is but they should have a range of classes. Dwarves, they're going to have a range of different people. Just kind of, I mean, it's weird to talk about realism in a fantasy a game, but if you have a group of people with their culture, they're not going to be monolithic. They're
certainly.
So I definitely, that is a good description there. On the other hand, from a game designer point of view and a game player point of view, that vastly increases the complexity of the rules.
It does. It certainly does. But Is it increasing you can increase complexity without increasing difficulty. If you're not increasing the difficulty, I think people will take more options. I think it's when complexity leads to a higher difficulty check being required uh, to understand the latest and greatest that you have the issues.
Yeah, that's kind of where the feats go off the rails. It's like if you decide, well, I want to play elf, and say the elves have, say, 4 classes to choose from, all of the other classes of all the other races aren't really too much of a concern to you. You don't even need to think about them as a player,
Right?
And if nobody, and if no, and as a GM, you only need to think about the people who are the players that are actually in your campaign. So you can ignore all.
True, but as a GM, of course, you don't know what your players are going to choose ahead of time. So a lot of times, you're trying to get at least a basic knowledge of all their options, so you're prepared for the questions.
Right. But as the campaign goes, you know what you're dealing with on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, you get to funnel what your own workload becomes.
Yeah, but now when you compare it to like the feat trees and all the feats in 3.5, I mean that's just a bewildering weight of it's just there's so many feats there, and then you throw in expansions and whatnot, and every class has to wade through all of the feats to understand what they want to be doing, and it's like, yeah, that's gotten out of hand. So I said, yeah, that's difficult. I think it's the game designer who's got the hardest part with the class specific or the race specific classes. Instead of having 4 basic classes and 4 races, you now have 16 distinct classes, and that's just a lot more work on the designer side.
Oh, certainly, but once it's done, it's one and done.
That's true.
Once you've designed it, you don't have to redesign it. So it's more work up front, but it gives more options down the line. Yeah, I personally, to me, that was the perfect solution to the whole idea of racist class. That was I always liked that the way they handled it.
Yeah, and this is Labyrinth Lords, did you say?
It's Adventurer Conqueror King system, otherwise known as AXE.
Okay.
It's like a branch off of Labyrinth Lord. Labyrinth Lord is your clone of Basic Expert, so it's your Basic Expert rewritten for modern sensibilities and editing and layout and all that stuff.
Okay,
and then
so
Adventurer Conqueror King branches off that.
Okay, so if you're starting with basically the simpler character class designs, it's a lot much more feasible thing to tackle with than like if you wanted to start with classes of 3.5 complexity, and then you wanted to create a complete set of classes for each race.
Oh God!
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I mean, it would be probably a really good variant on 3.5, but it would be.
You'd need a whole book just on classes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just for space alone. You just.
So what brings us to let's go to
question number 4.
Yes.
Question number 4 is the one that it seems to either get very quick responses that aren't very detailed, or gets into the, my God, I hate this question. Save or die. What is, not the podcast that's out there, but save or die as a game mechanic. How do you feel?
I think it depends on the game group.
Okay.
It's like, my current group, save or die, just doesn't find that fun. Is that it's like, well, I just rolled a natural 1, I'm done. That's now, and part of it is okay, so somebody loses their character. What is the time scale that they get back into the game? Because it really sucks to be, stuck at the table for an hour and a half while everybody either gets your character raised, or they can squeeze in a new character into the storyline or whatever.
Right, and they strip your body. I know.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, how fun do the people at the table find it? I mean, there's a certain bit of that really kind of save or die. It really dials up the threat level.
It does.
So it can really jump up the excitement for the people who like that kind of thing. I GM a lot more than I play as a player, and so in a certain sense, I'm always playing save or die. And I usually die. Okay, it's very rare for my monsters to get away, and that's kind of by design. So I can see it that way. It's like if you can iterate through quickly. I guess I would say the one failing of Save or Die is that it has a tendency to take somebody out of the game for extended periods of time. And if you can work around that, I think it works well.
I think that Save or Die certainly is system dependent. If you're playing something like low-level Swords and Wizardry, where if your character dies, you can be back up and running in 10 minutes or less, that's one thing. If it's Pathfinder, where even getting a new character into play can take you an hour, that's it's certainly a larger hardship on somebody who who's already invested an hour plus into just getting their character on that piece of paper. At the same time, even for systems where Save or Die works, like old school gaming, and Save or Die should be used rarely. It should be sparingly, and you should be. It shouldn't be that random trap in a hallway that kills you. It should be, all right, we got the big MacGuffin here. Here's the golden chalice with platinum inlays. Gee, it's just sitting here on this table. Do you think it's trapped? That's where Save or Die might come into play. I think when it should be broadcast. The players should know there's a risk, as opposed to just stumbling into it.
So, let me think about this. I'm going to kind of reverse looking at it. I'm going to look at. Sure. I mentioned earlier about the one shot on the Lucent Worm. Okay, and that was, people talk about that for years, and that's kind of an inverted Save or Die situation. It's like Save or Die ought to be possible, but it ought to be really rare. It's almost like it should be like 2 or 3 saves or die. You have to fail.
I can accept that.
You have to fail to find the trap, and then you have to fail to disable the trap, and you have to fail to throw against the poison. It should. It shouldn't be it's Save or Die. I think the part of the problem with Save or Die is often a single save. It's a natural one fails. So that's 1 in 20 chance. That's way too easy for a Save or Die.
Right, and what if your saving throw is actually 11? So even with bonuses, now maybe you're at an 8. You have a good chance it's still dying. Even with poisons that are Save or Die, I'd rather have a poison that instead of Save or Die is doing 2d6 damage a round, and you get to save each round. So you might die. You hopefully won't die, but you certainly might die. But you'll have maybe a little time to figure out a way not to.
But, it's kind of from my point of view, a Save or Die situation should be a great tragedy, not just a dumb accident.
Right. No, and again, the players should have an idea there's a risk involved, a serious risk. It shouldn't be random.
And it shouldn't be random, but it should evoke a great struggle to avoid it.
No, certainly.
So I think there's kind of like this is the first time I've really given a lot of thought of this. So some of this may be nonsense, but it's like it is kind of a dramatic thing, and so the way to make Save or Die work is it has to be a dramatic event. And I think that's a good point just to stop there.
Yeah, no, certainly. All right, well, here we'll go to the last question, and To be honest, we've covered a lot of ground in between these questions, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to ask you an important question. You
Okay.
started gaming. How old were you when you started gaming?
I was 14 or 15.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the teenage you, if that 14 or 15-year-old could see what you would be doing in the hobby right now, what you would have accomplished, what you've been working on, what would that teenage you think?
Wow, I don't know where to begin.
I love this question because it's a question that really makes folks think. So let's see where it goes.
What would my teenage you, what would the 15-year-old me think?
Hmm.
I mean, this is such, a part of it. Here's the question: is what I'm doing mainly for the hobby these days is working on this virtual tabletop. Okay, so I got my first computer a year or two after I got into gaming.
Okay.
So there's 35 years of personal computer evolution that I almost have to
I,
explain to the teenage me before I can. I mean, that's kind of like the wow. I mean, the teenage me thinking about what myself, I'd be just sitting there trying to absorb it all. It would be like days before I could even begin to formulate and understand everything I'm seeing.
it's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is I mean, so much has changed. I mean, gaming is. I mean, some sense. I mean, the heritage of D&D, you can still see it, and even I mean, I've read some of the rules of 5e. It's still the same game.
Right.
It's obvious. There's a lot of heritage there, a lot of evolution. Um, you know, so but the context of it, you know, it's like simply the simple social context of what it means to be a gamer these days. I mean, we're on Discord. Discord is this basically it's a company that is for supporting gamers, financed by venture capitalists with for a considerable sum of money. Um, and that's like, this is such a radically different world. I don't.
Oh, extremely.
Yeah.
You weren't able to argue rules with people across the country or across the world. You weren't getting uh, people self-publishing. I mean, sure, there were games that were small press and self-published, but nowhere near like this. No PDF documents, and oh yeah, it's a totally different world.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's just yeah, it's such a big question because it's basically looking back and trying to summarize everything that has changed in 35 years in just the narrow intersection of gaming and computers.
but let's narrow that down to just this: teenage you looking at you now and saying, "Wow, I don't even know what a virtual tabletop is, but my God, you're involved in this hobby.
Okay.
You're no, I mean, because there's many ways to look at this question, but the young you looking at you being involved in this hobby, would they ever have expected that? To the point where you're embedded in it right now to a large extent.
um well, no, the teenage me was going to go to college, it was going to go get a degree in physics, be a doctorate, and become a famous scientist.
Okay.
That was very much at the age of 15. That was my life plan. Um, I graduated from college and decided I I basically jumped over and worked as an engineer and then as a programmer for so my life went off on different directions. And I was kind of more or less out of gaming for about 10 years or so.
Yeah, same here.
From college to my early 30s.
Right.
When I got back into I was working at Black and Decker, which was a very traditional Fortune 400 Fortune 500 company. I don't know if they still are or not, but at the time they were. And I was kind of plugging into a very traditional life. I mean, I wasn't completely out of it, but and then I went to work for an ISP and got hooked up with all my friends that I game with these days. Internet service provider. It's a thing that doesn't really exist anymore. They've been yeah. Well, you've been around long. You remember?
You need an ISP, especially when it's up in the Poconos. It's like, oh god, I gotta get a local ISP. Who was funny enough. We had dial up at my parents' place probably until about 10 years ago. And like last year, the ISP sends me a monthly, apparently they still exist. They sent me a monthly bill for the first time in 10 years after I canceled. And I was just like, yeah, okay. I'm not paying my $19.95 for dial-up service that doesn't exist anymore. I don't think so.
That sounds like an automated system that just
that's what I figured
out about.
Yep. Oops, how much did this mistake cost us in postage alone? But yeah. So listen, now we've covered the questions. We've almost covered the whole podcast. But and we've already talked a little bit about Virtua Rasa, but let's get a little bit deeper into it, because you are the programmer. You are the man behind the curtain. You are the great Oz.
Well, it's both Ben and I, but yeah. So I've been kind of trying to one thing to kind of a high level. What are we trying to do here? And this is almost stepping one step beyond gaming. Is I think of Facebook and Twitter as kind of this virtual public square. And what the way I'm approaching this is what we're trying to do is we're trying to create either like a virtual coffee shop, a virtual game store, a virtual living room. Okay, it's a personal space. It's your space, as opposed to Facebook, which is really space you're sharing with everybody else, and everybody who wants to say something comes up and yells it, and whatnot. Really, the experience of using Virtua Rasa, the goal we're looking for is you get together with some friends around a table, or sprawled on your living room couches. In fact, one use case I kind of hope is people use this, toss this up on their TV set. So everybody can sprawl on the couch. You can use the TV set as the game board. You got the GM sitting there with their iPad to move things around. Everybody else can have an iPad or a phone. It works with the phone, but we're still tuning it. It's like really hard to make work well on that small of a screen. But we're working on that. So that's kind of where we're going there. We've already talked about kind of our goal of minimal amount of effort to get going, but you should reward almost as much effort as you want to give it. If you want to spend, as a GM, if you really like spending 4 hours detailing out your city map, we'll make it possible for you to put it in. On the other hand, if you want to have, 4 lines of notes of what you want the encounters to be for tonight, and you're going to wing it on the fly, you can do that too. So some of the things, I mean, you've looked at it, you've dragged units around.
Oh yeah,
we got the bog standard chat client. Which should work exactly like you expect a chat client to do. I added a couple things I call gestures. If you shift click, it'll put up an arrow with your name on it that everybody can see. That's so you can.
That's cool.
Yeah, so you can point at the map and say, "Hey, what's at this point?" Or I want to target my fireball at this point. Okay, because you got to be able to point at the map. And if you shift, click, and drag, you can draw on the map.
Well, you know what? I'm doing that right now.
Oh,
Pretty
awesome!
Cool.
Yeah, and I think the model for that is this is basically a whiteboard, a transparent whiteboard on top of the map. The arrows and the drawing. So all the players and all the GMs, you can scribble on the map all you want. There's that pinkish eraser button up on the top. If you hit that, everything will get erased, so you can start. That's kind of thing. We call it that. What's it? The John Madden feature was originally how we thought of it. How they draw on the screen on the football games.
Oh yeah. Put your X's and your O's out here. No.
Yeah. We couldn't quite do it as real time. It was really jerky as real time. So what happens is you draw a curve or a line, and you'll see it's dashed, and then when you're let up, it then submits the whole drawing. We tried to do it real time, but it was just a little too slow. And this seems to be a good compromise. You can see what you're drawing as a dashed line, and then everybody gets to see it. Let's see here. The other things, there's various GM tools for dropping random items on the screen. We threw in a wiki for campaign notes, and you can you can have GM private notes. You can have public notes and whatnot. And the GM, of course, can create a bunch of private notes and then reveal them to the players as digital handouts. You can upload images. The image uploads, half the reason we have a wiki was you need some way to upload your images. And so the wiki is our image store. So you can upload your images. So you draw up a map. The camera, we're running out of time, so I'll just describe the camera. What you can do with the camera is you can point a camera at your game map. You're sitting on top of your dining room table map with your minis on it. And we do enough math at the back end that if you tell us where the four corners of your map are and how big it is, we'll make it all line up on the screen with the squares, so that you can have some people sitting around the table looking at the map, and then you have other people remotely looking at the map on your screen. And then the screen will all be mapped up on the grid scales so that people remotely can point at the map coordinated. And we did something a little different than video. When you go to like Google Hangouts and you're streaming, and if you're having a night like we're having tonight, where the bandwidth is dropping out, Google the video compromises by reducing the resolution to keep the frame rate up. Okay, we do the exact opposite. Okay, because if you're looking at a game board is largely static. What really matters is that you can see what's on it. And if what you're seeing is 2 seconds old but sharp, that is better than smooth movement that is blurry. So we only update once a second. Since it's integrated with the map, the remote people can zoom in and out on specific parts of the map. So, and it works fairly well. I mean, I as a remote player, I've used the camera on top of the ceiling, pointed down at a map with Google Hangouts, and I've used this, and this is vastly more enjoyable to use. I feel much more. Just a standard video feed feels very disconnected. This feels like more connected to the game. And we also have a habit of what we call sometimes dungeon cam, where you don't have to do a perspective correction, and you can basically do a mini's eye view of the map.
Oh, okay.
Which can be a lot of fun if somebody's gone to a lot of trouble to bring a lot of painted minis up. And that's actually kind of fun for even the people who are there. because usually you got a bunch of minis on the map, and everybody's got the eagle's eyes view, and putting a webcam down at the level of the minis kind of creates a neat little view. So that can be fun too.
That's kind of like what Matt Finch does on his YouTube series. I've watched a couple of the episodes, and it really is immersive once you get that camera down on the actual terrain with the minis and the doors and the walls and the details.
Yeah. So I think that's a high point. We have a forum. Let's see here. I recently added the ability to log in with Discord.
Nice.
And yeah, that was Discord, Google, Facebook. That seems to have been a big friction point. People seem to be overloaded today on accounts and passwords. So, yeah. Although it's interesting, I find most people have very strong opinions about it. They either absolutely want to log in with their Google account or whatever, or they absolutely refuse to log in with their Google account or whatever.
It's one of those things that doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground. I must admit that I've gotten to the point where I'd rather not keep on creating new accounts. So I'll do the Google login when available, or the Facebook login when available. Just it saves long-term stress on my end, I think.
Yeah, it's and also, for a lot of my accounts at this point, I can never remember the password, so I go through the password reset mechanism, and it's like, is this actually secure? Yeah. So, another thing about you probably noticed that the pieces, the units, the players, they're all very simple polygons. That's a simple baseline we have. We want to do fancier art. And you can upload your own art for unit images. Although you can upload your own. That's part of the wiki. You can, if you have a particular unit image you want to use for a unit, monsters or whatever, you can upload them. There's a couple of interesting things I found playing with this system. It really kind of changes games. Part of the reason I haven't put a lot of effort for our own games for art is you'll notice you really zoom out far. You can see a huge map. The way I've got it zoomed out right now, I think it's about 30 by 30.
Okay.
All right. The units are getting kind of small. If there was any sort of complex art there at all, I'd have a hard time telling things apart. It's kind of hard as it is. Right now, it's shape and color coded. And I don't think you can really. So now that you have the capability of playing on a 100 by 100 map, you got to be kind of careful about how complicated you make your artwork if you want to actually be able to make things out. And the other thing I've noticed is when you can play on a 100 by 100 map, it really changes the game. And in some ways, you could say it actually breaks the game. Suddenly, wizard spells that have 1,000-foot range almost completely dominate the battlefield. By the time you can actually close to melee range, the artillery has pretty much ended things.
That's pretty cool, actually. You can do that. Yeah. That would be perfect for Operation White Box, the World War II hack.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the thing. I guess I'm thinking from the role playing part of the game is, your standard dungeon crawl, your city adventure. Everything is kind of predicated on things start with like 1 or 2 rounds of movement. So you don't have this long period where the archers and the wizards are basically sniping at the other side.
True.
Once you introduce that into the game, you greatly weaken the ability of the melee fighters to do much. It really changes.
That is a change when you go. Yeah, well, that's the whole change from a lot of your wilderness encounters and your dungeon encounters. Wilderness, it opens up. This
right.
Yeah, you really do deal a lot more at a distance.
Right. It's just it's something we never really encountered ourselves because we would always start like a long range encounter was the two far ends of our tabletop map.
Yeah. Okay.
Or
I got you.
maybe an inch or two off. Okay, and it was a practical matter as, you know, we don't want to be running this ridiculous distance. Um, and now the ends of your map can be really large. It's just an observation there. It's something that kind of a slight heads up to the GMs and the players that if you aren't careful, you could end up really changing the power dynamic of your game.
No, point taken. And I never, that's I usually when I game face to face and theater of the mind. And when you think about it, you tend to run your wilderness encounters very much like a dungeon encounter in theater of the mind. You don't take into account that great distance that really these encounters should be starting at.
Yeah. Yeah, but now we make it really easy for you to do that. And, and there's lots of things the GM can do to prevent that happening. And in the wilderness, it's not often that you're going to have a convenient 300-yard field that you can begin your encounter from. There's usually trees and buildings and whatnot. But again, it's a different way of looking at things. So
certainly, I don't know if you've heard in the background, but for the last 10 minutes, my dog has been whining. It's like, Daddy, you're taking too long.
It's time for the walk, is it?
No. She's pretty well trained for these podcasts. Usually she waits till I've already signed out and I'm doing the after podcast chat, and she knows the dynamics have changed, and she's like, okay, I've been quiet the whole time. Now come and play with me, give me a treat. And I think today she's like, I've waited too long. Come on. She's a sweetheart. She if she was being a real nerd, she'd be really barking like she used to do some of my earlier podcasts a couple of years ago. She's gotten a lot better. But Jeff, this has been great, and I'll tell you the truth. Our last 40+ minutes or so have been perfect. We haven't had any issues with Discord or bandwidth.
Yes, that's great. Great. I've enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Now, I'll remind you during the podcast. Just send me a PM with a bunch of links so I can put this up.
Oh, okay.
In the show notes. Any links you want me to include?
To tell you the truth, I think the top level link to Virtua Rasa is we've been trying to put more and more stuff right there so that you go to that page and it's obvious what you want to do.
So that is virtuarasa.com.
Yeah, let's see here. I outsmarted myself 1 second here.
And just so folks don't make the mistake I made last time, it's not Virtual Rasa, it's Virtua Rasa.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that when you were talking to.
Yeah, I was like, I couldn't find it, and then I realized, of course, it's my mind was adding a letter that didn't belong.
Yeah, that I'm afraid it's a branding fail on our part, and I'm not sure I can. It's probably too late to do anything about that.
I wouldn't even worry about it.
There's our link. That'll take us to there. There is the demo world Tekninge. Oh yeah, I didn't even tell you about our name generator. Bad Jeff. I went through and created a name generator based on some language stuff.
Nice.
And it's integrated. So you create a unit, it's an NPC, you can use it. Have you ever seen Uncharted Atlas?
No.
It's a Twitter feed. The guy has written some automated tools to generate maps and generate in names.
Oh, geez, okay.
Yeah, it's fun to look at. Uncharted Atlas, go on to Twitter. Upstate like once an hour or so. He's open sourced most of his code. So I grabbed his language generator and imported it. And so you get distinct language styles. Like you've seen them on the units when you connect to the demo world. You get a unit with the name. Well, I see somebody. We have Tring Drung. That's all comes out of the language that is generated, and you can change seeds and get very different languages.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll definitely even include a link to the map generator. I'm looking at it right now. It looks pretty interesting. That's another rabbit hole for me to delve into.
Oh yeah, no. Hold on a moment here. Oh, you know what? Let me pop up the random names because that's a separate link. That doesn't require anything.
Definitely.
That doesn't. The random names doesn't require any fancy. Um, there. It doesn't require any fancy permissions or counts or anything.
All right.
It takes the world name as a seed. If you change the seed, you get a whole different language.
I will include that link in the show notes too. Excellent.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, I apologize for the 20 minutes or so. That wasn't us. That was a Discord bandwidth issue, but we've had an excellent fireside chat here with Jeff. I want to again thank you, Jeff, for joining and
Thank you.
putting up with the frustrations that we started with. Appreciate it.
And we made it.
Show notes will be linked into the description for this episode. As always, folks, stay safe. God bless. Roll your dice well. And I will talk with you all tomorrow. Later, folks.